The next speaker is Julie Sherry from the Fast Food Rights Campaign and Unite the Resistance.
Well, I think the conference today and all the experiences, the strikes, the campaigns and stuff that we've heard from is actually been, I didn't realise it before, but I felt like I really needed it, because you look at the week that we've had and you're hit with the fact that now the most powerful country in the world has Donald Trump, a racist, sexist billionaire, as its president. It's, we all kind of fight that sense of despair, but actually waking up and seeing the result, it was a complete shock, even though you can understand the reasons for it. There's something quite surreal about the fact that this is now the situation. And you look at the kind of process that took place, I think, in that election, which is that polarisation, that deep bitterness among millions of working class people, years of neoliberalism, that hatred of the establishment really that has led to the collapse at the centre of politics. That's not something that's just happening in America. That's something that I think, looking back through 2016, we can relate to quite strongly here as well. On the one hand, you got the election of Jeremy Corbyn, this fantastic development. On the other hand, we know, what was contained in some of the elements of the Brexit vote because of what the Tories and the mainstream media have done, whipping up racism. And, I think it can be quite easy, really, to be swept along by that sense of how terrible the situation is when you look around at the world. This sense that there's an argument that racists are on the rise, that Theresa May is, all-powerful. I feel like I've been having discussions about this all week that can almost lead to a kind of sense of paralysis and a sense of hopelessness about what we can do. But actually, if you look at the situation, how powerful is Theresa May? Really, for one thing, the Brexit vote was a cry of rage, I think, against the establishment, and it's left the Tories in an even deeper crisis than they were in already. But you also look at things like, the fact that they've backtracked on the education bill, another U-turn. This is a very weak government that is there for the taking. And, the difference for us, I suppose, is that we've, than the US, is that we've got Jeremy Corbyn reflecting this massive mood for an alternative, the emergence of a hopeful movement where the word socialism is popularised again in the mainstream media. And you look at, what the Tories are doing in terms of racist division, and it actually makes a huge difference to try and provide an alternative to that. When you have a Labour leader who joins anti-racist demonstrations, who makes a point of turning up, mass conferences put on by Stand Up to Racism and so on, this is a very hopeful situation in lots of ways. Another thing, John obviously mentioned the junior doctors dispute, so I'll say less about that. But, those strikes were really a sign of how the trade union movement can draw in new layers. I'm not that old. I turned up at picket lines and I felt like I was old. That young workers, the armbands on the picket lines, leading the strikes, singing songs. You got this real sense of a rejuvenation of the movement, and a highly politicised campaign that was about the defence of the NHS. And for all the Tories' attempts to demonise, actually what you saw when they escalated the strikes was that support went up in the public. That in the polls they showed that more people supported the doctors, when they escalated their action. But of course, that dispute also does sum up the problem of where we are, that huge potential just wasn't seized. The TUC didn't call the national demonstration to defend the NHS and support the doctors. The union leaders in Unison and other health unions didn't seize that huge mood of anger among widespread layers of health workers who wanted to see themselves become part of the action because they knew that the attack was coming to them next. And now we have a situation, where the mandate's been withdrawn for the strikes, and this is a pretty sad situation to see when you look at the energy and the potential that was in that dispute. So those at the top of our union movement are not calling the action that we need. And, the Trade Union Act is just another example of that, really, at the situation facing us now. So really, in that situation, what today's conference is about is trying to draw together the networks of resistance that do exist, and to try and strengthen them, and to try and make sure that we all know about Durham, and we know about Southern Rail, and we know about Ritzy and the libraries and so on, and to try and use that as a way to build our confidence, to put more pressure for that kind of level of action. But, I think that you can paint a picture and it all feels quite, what do we do? But the flip side is actually, hearing from the Durham people particularly, I think, this morning was just absolutely wonderful. I mean, people, if you get a chance, should go on their Facebook feed and watch all the little videos of the big strike rallies and the demonstrations and everything, because what you can see really is that fighting spirit of our class is absolutely alive and well. So what we want to do is take that into every trade union branch possible, every workplace, give a flavour of the disputes to make sure that we rally behind them and that they win. But not just to do that, to take inspiration for them, to hear their stories, to use it as a way to give us all the shot in the arm that we need to feel like we can fight back. And with trade union activists all around this room, we need to also think how we can look for opportunities to see more Durhams and more Ritzies and so on, because the attacks are coming thick and fast, and we need more examples of where we can fight. And, I think there's also very big ways to connect with that huge audience around Corbyn's ideas. I mean, John talked about that fantastic demonstration last week where the libraries and the museums came together, and I felt what it was like was almost that kind of beginnings of the anti-austerity movement, where you felt like people had come from all around the country, part of real campaigns. It was a similar experience at the Housing Act Summit, 300 odd people turning up at that and talking about how we can fight back against the attacks on housing. And on Saturday, coming up next week, we're going to have a national demonstration over education that I think everybody needs to think that's not just for, lecturers and teachers and students. That's for every single trade unionist to get there with a banner and to try and bring some people along and be enthused by that kind of mood that there is for real change and that real anger that there is about what's happening to our education system, our health service. We've got a national demonstration on the 4th of March coming up now to defend the NHS. And I won't say a lot about it because other people have covered it, but the work that's been done by the Bakers Union, by the Ritzy, by Unite and Sports Direct. I mean, the workshop this afternoon was a really, really uplifting, inspiring experience to sit through, because you could just feel this real cross-fertilisation of people actually organising in very, very difficult circumstances, but in a very political way, and giving a lead around putting on big events about £10 an hour, 0 hours, austerity, and actually drawing in layers of workers that we're told aren't political or can't be organised and so on, and actually bringing a new energy into the movement. And so I think one of the things that Trump's election really underlines for us here is how crucial it is for our unions not just to actually take on the question of how do we actually fight austerity, but our unions have to put themselves at the centre of developing an anti-racist current inside our movement. And so I know there's been leaflets going round for a conference by Stand Up to Racism specifically for trade unionists on the 4th of February. Everybody should book up for that. Everybody should think about bringing people with them to that event and holding meetings in their workplace to build it and so on, because this is something that we really need to take on in a proactive way and not feel paralysed and scared about the question of racism. And, when you have a Labour leadership that's supportive of these demands, that wants to see an anti-austerity, anti-racist movement, that's really an open space for our unions to mobilise. And, 6 million trade union members in this country, those that lead our unions, that's a massive force that could be mobilised. And it's a massive force that's very, very angry and fed up of austerity. And the Daniel Blake stuff really kind of electrified that issue. I think how much people wanted to talk about that film, but also how much people wanted to talk about, was Theresa May going to go and see it, and how good it was to see Corbyn raising it and going for her on that issue. And so that gives people a confidence, and I think our unions have to seize that moment, and we have to build from the bottom up to push to make sure that they do. Because, the only way really that we're going to win those demands and push the Tories onto the back foot and defend John and Jeremy and what they stand for is not by waiting for them to be elected, as much as it would be fantastic, and I'm sure there'd be all kinds of wonderful things that would come from their election. We have to actually fight in the here and now to come behind those demands and to mobilise and to make them into reality. And, that's going to take a fight in some unions, I think. I mean, the most interesting lesson I think that came out of the Durham stuff was what Megan was saying this morning about, initially the union leadership was a bit hesitant and so on, and actually you guys made them, you made them fight, and look at the incredible resistance that you've built. And we can win if we fight, and we need to push our unions to make sure that we do that.